but level 1 is part of level 2. So if you get level 1 done, you're already that far along into level 2 because they are part of each other, if you will. Level 1 is part of level 2.
And so when we're thinking about the Jedi trials, we can think about the first one as a skill. The second trial is more your courage. Your third trial is the trial of the flesh, the physical. The fourth trial is your spirit. And finally, the fifth trial is insight. And we're going to go through each of these. Everything must work together.
All right, welcome everybody to the CMMC webinar series. We've done a lot of these series over many, many years of being involved in this space. But now we've decided to take it to a little bit of a higher level, if you will, and we have turned our old school webinars into the modern cool style, which is the podcast, because you're not hip unless you're doing a podcast. Therefore, we're going that route. I'm kidding, but again, I'm Kelly Kendall, CEO and president here at KNC, and I'm joined by the professor, as I refer to him, as Greg McBerry, who's a consultant with us and a partner with us and helps our clients, and is also a diehard Star Wars fan. So we're going to be having some fun with this. So first of all, welcome to the official first episode of CMMC Wars. And the point of this is to not get sued by George Lucas. Outside of that, everything else will be good. But CMMC Wars, this is all about using Star Wars and analogies with Star Wars to teach CMMC concepts. And it's amazing how well it works. We've done this a couple of times, and every time it was so well received that we decided, let's make it into a podcast series. We're going to do episodes every month throughout the year. We've got everything planned out. So we're going to have some fun. So before we get into the content, I'm just going to cover a little bit about us for the sake of those watching that don't know us or those watching the recording that don't know us that well. We are a full-fledged CMMC provider. Now we are officially on the consulting side. We are officially a registered practitioner organization, RPO. We held off on that for many reasons, but just to make it official, we are an RPO on the consulting side. We are an authorized C3PAO for the assessments and have been doing those since January of last year. And we are a managed services provider. A lot of people don't know this about us, but we are building out and building up some great managed services and solutions for our clients in their path to getting to their CMMC assessment themselves. So a little bit about us. We are the first C3PO. I can't say we're the only anymore, but we were the first C3PO authorized in California for 17 months. That's insane to me that I can say that. There is one more now in California, but we were the first. So I can still say that. We've been around for a long time. Myself and Chuck is on here as well, are the co-founders, two of the founders. The other one is the N in KNC. So KNC still stands for Kelly, Nick, Chuck. If you didn't know that, now you do. N is for Nick, combat veteran, Marine Corps, great guy, just unfortunately had some terrible health problems, and that prevented him from being able to participate in the company. We still consider him a founder, though. So, like I said, been around 2018, and I just, stole my own thunder, but there's Kelly, Nick, Chuck. We've been doing this consulting work in CMMC space for over 6 years now. I think we're getting to 7. And so this is the space we've lived in, both on the consulting side and on the assessments. We're pretty much split 50-50 between doing consulting with CMMC prep clients and doing assessments. And let's see. Couple of our name drops that we like to drop down here, especially working with the City of Los Angeles Information Technology Agency. We've done 3 projects with them, and we've got a couple more coming, and they've been a great city to work with. Done some penetration testing for some other cities, and just some really fun stuff outside of the typical defense contractors that we work with. All right. For the sake of what we do in our assessments realm, obviously, CMMC Level 2 assessments, the official ones. We also do mock assessments. We can do a mock with remediation if we're the consulting side. We can do a mock with no consulting if we're on the official assessor, but we could still be the actual assessor for your real assessment. We have to be extremely careful that we don't provide consulting advice, brick wall, to keep that separation, if you will, intact. We do gap analysis. A lot of times that's one of the very first or one of the second or third steps we do in a new engagement. So we do a lot of gap analysis. We do pen testing, vulnerability. You guys can see us. I'm not going to sit here and do death by PowerPoint and read every screen, but this is a little bit more in depth about what we do in these three areas: consulting, CMMC prep, of course. But we also do full program implementation, virtual CISO. We do a lot of incident response work. Greg just got done doing a great on-site incident response tabletop exercise, literally not even tabletop, it was conference room top training, as you would call it. And I got to walk in and buy him lunch and see him all getting there. And it was a great event, extremely well received. And that's an offering that we offer to our clients now of a great, way better than just a simple, let's chat for 15 minutes and call it a tabletop exercise. Creates great evidence for your assessment. And then obviously risk management. Our managed services side. So this is where we're building out a lot of the solutions for our clients, and I guess you could say future clients. Everything from enclaves to keeping you continuously compliant, post-assessment, KnowBe4. If you guys don't know KnowBe4, you should. They are an awesome provider in the space of the security and awareness training, and they're now FedRAMP. I just got that yesterday. So KnowBe4 is an awesome partner of ours. We're doing a patch management as a service to take away one of the most annoying things for a lot of your IT folks. So sometimes companies outsource that to us. And then obviously we do a lot in solutions management and GCC High. We've got some really cool stuff going with GCC High implementations, speed of getting them up and running, small GCC enclaves, all kinds of cool stuff we built out. So, okay. I try not to talk too fast, but I wanted to get through all that to get to the point and get to what you guys are actually here for, not the infomercial. But that's okay. Thank you for bearing with me to getting through that. So, CMMC Wars. What is this all about? So I will steal a tiny bit of Greg's thunder, and then I'm going to give it over to Greg. So obviously, we have to start out with episode 4. If you don't get that reference, that's okay. It's a great Star Wars reference, and we had a joke about it, and we thought it was hilarious. So this is episode 4 that we're starting with. And of course, Greg's hilarious comment that I love that he came up with: in a galaxy not so far DFARs away. Okay, I have taken enough time. Greg, I'm going to give it over to you. And if you're ready, I'll jump to the next screen.
Sure. So today we're really talking about where do you start and where do you begin, and how the beginning is the end, and that is your scoping. And where that all goes forward. And we're going to walk you through that scoping journey from, I know most of you are pretty far along, but we're speaking to general audiences. So how would I go from youngling who's just finding out about the CMMC thing to a Padawan working with an MSP and has someone to help me to being a full-blown scoping Jedi master? And that's through our scoping academy. So with that, Kelly, you can take us on to the next screen.
All right.
And I think I just repeated myself here, but when you think about where you're going to begin at your CMMC journey, or for those of you who are MSPs, how you get your clients to start, you have to begin somewhere. And you have to grow these skills over time. You can't just jump in and understand the basis of the scoping guidance. There is the scoping guide published by the DoD CIO. There's, all of the information in 37 and 53. If you actually took all of the knowledge that is in any document that you have to read for CMMC, it's almost 2,600 pages. So it's about a half a Bible. So it is a massive amount of knowledge, and you can't go in being able to read the entire library in the archive. You have to grow as a person. And so today's talk is really to think about a young manufacturer who is going from the beginning all the way to when they have their boundary diagram done. There's a misconception that you can kind of like attack CMMC before you do your risk assessments and before you do your boundary diagrams. But if you really spend the time nailing down your segmentation strategies, nailing down how you're going to separate your CUI environments logically and physically from the rest of your commercial environments, then the SSP just falls in place. So it's okay to put a ton of effort into that front end so that the pieces then fall into place once you have a picture. Without the scope, you're trying to build a puzzle without looking at the front of the box, and you just have a massive jumble of pieces with no plan. Why don't we move ahead, please? The force. What is it that flows through your CUI environments? And that's really your data flow. What we like to begin with, and Kelly, I should have had the other screen popped up of our swim lane diagrams. I wanted to put this one after this.
Oh, okay.
But we'll put that into the show notes for after the show. But you need to think about your data flows. And like any meditative state, it's really a series of questions. And it's okay to think about CUI in very elementary levels. You're a young one. Just do who, what, when, where, why, and how every single time. Who sends me CUI? How do I get it? Where do I put it? Once I have it, where does it go? Who accesses it? Who must have access? What processes require CUI? Do I need to use a step file on an engineering machine? If I'm writing my step file, then I just have the PDF open of the drawing and not actually download it to my desktop and just look at it and be able to write my job worker without actually having to change it. Where's that CUI stored? Is it only staying in a FedRAMP high cloud? Is it being stored on my endpoint? Is it being processed on my endpoint? How does that data flow through my environment? You have to map it to understand it, to secure it. If you don't really know what you're going to protect, you can't get started. And so when we have clients work through their data flows, and for those of you that are MSPs, you can do the same process. It's a semi-structured interview. You come up with your interview questions, you have them ready to go, and you have to think about it almost like the CUI lifecycle. So you can, and it changes based off the business type. But say they're like a biz dev, and they just, they supplement government employees working on GFE on site. That workflow, you can think about it from the bid process on the RFP, pre-contract, contract, post-contract. For a manufacturer, it might be they download from DoD Safe, and you're asking about that process. Who then gets that data where it gets downloaded? Maybe it gets stored on an on-prem box because your ERP system was written by this guy named Dwayne 35 years ago, and it's a custom-built app, and nobody knows how to move it off of a Linux box. So everything is kind of on-prem. And then it moves from there to getting printed out and then going to your QM shop. So those data flows are critical. Spend the time to do them well. Kelly, any tips or questions on data flow diagramming?
Yeah, two thoughts I wanted to add to that is one is something somebody told me once, and I thought it was hilarious, but it was a great other way to think about your data flow is think of CUI as a virus, and everywhere it can go, it infects. And that's what you've got to trace down is everywhere that piece of data can go. And we've done this exercise with all of our clients in the beginning. Every client is different. But every time the exercise itself, which is walking through and talking through, okay, it comes from here, it goes to there, it goes to there, this person touches it, this person, it goes over here. Every time, so many things are discovered as far as, it goes over, forgot about him. Oh yeah, this, that. It's always a great exercise, but it's also sometimes extremely difficult. You would think sometimes it'd just be easy to trace it through. It depends on the org. But we've had times where it's taken, 3-4 weeks of weekly working sessions to get the data flow diagram done. And so it's not just a exercise in where does it go? This becomes one of the most important artifacts at the start of your assessment. So every time we start an assessment, the first call we have is a scoping call. What we look at in there is your network diagram, your data flow diagram, if you have one, and it's so helpful when there is one. And then we talk about the rest of your scoping. So this and your network diagram are the two key artifacts in the very first call when you start an assessment. So very, very important process that you go through here. All right, that's all I have.
And think about it with like Luke. When Obi-Wan first handed him that lightsaber, he couldn't use it because he couldn't see in field force. And an enterprise scope or a CUI enclave is kind of the same thing. If you can't feel it, if you can't see where the data is going, you can't yield the tool. All right. So let's move on to that next slide and figure out where our youngling is going now that he's moved that. The initiate trials. So for those who don't know, when a youngling is discovered that is and that can feel the force, that is force sensitive, they have to complete an initiate trial. And knowing what you have to master is really your inventory. Whether you're level 1 or level 2, oftentimes when we get with clients that have to do CMMC, this is one of those things that they just have to get done first before they can even start. You give them a list of all of the required documents, all the required procedures, policies, and plans, and just ask them to just get the inventory under control. For shops that have like an AS9100 or a good QMS plan, you might already do this well. And you just have to connect in your mind, oh, my document control is very much like my ability to control UI. I just have to track it from provenance to the end of a project. But we spend a lot of time, and a lot of false starts happen because you do not have your document inventory in place. And you need to have it's actually literally a control objective to have document inventory as part of your inventory. But you should do this ahead of time, because a lot of information might live in a different document. It doesn't have to necessarily be in just your CUI HR guide. You might have your policy on how you screen employees. That might be already written down in the human resources manual. But if you don't have an inventory of all of your governing documents, it's really a hard place to start. So for any youngling company, it truly is one of the first challenges you face, is getting good control over all of your documentation. Because then you have to decide if your policies and your plans for CMMC are going to live outside of your existing documents, and if your procedures are going to be in both. And those are, and you don't need, procedure for every single domain. Some people set it up that way. Some people just have, some domains have like 6 procedures, like your media protection might have how you destroy CUI standard operating procedure. It might have a remote employee traveling with CUI operating procedure. So it's not a one-to-one correspondence. And just begin with what you already do well. What do you already have in your shop? Get a control over all the documentation that you already have. And that's really how a youngling would to face an initiate trial, in a sense. How you would deal with those overall effort. So it's really comes. Go ahead, Kelly.
I'm just going to add in here, when you're sitting here looking at this slide that looks awesome and it says document inventory, this is a really important part, because document inventory is a baseline configuration requirement. It actually talks about that in your documents. That's your document inventory. So you want to be able to have a listing of what your document inventory is. In other words, you've captured it. And you create a baseline of your documentation. This is our baseline. Doesn't have to be super complicated, but it has to be established and then reviewed and edited over time if it needs to be. So a lot of people miss this part about baselines tying into document inventory. So I wanted to mention that here, even though it's not exactly related to scope. It relates to the efforts you do when you're beginning or when you're trying to get there, all tie in to that end result and that assessment process. And so each one of these things you're building here, you're trying to figure out your scope. You're trying to get yourself ready for what your solution is going to be. You don't want to jump into, in the beginning, let's go right to the SSP. That's like the Jedi Master's guidebook. I don't know. I mean, you're just trying to jump to the hardest thing first. All of these little exercises and things you create all build up. And then the SSP is the master that covers it all. It's a master umbrella. Everything kind of flows into it. It's a much easier way to get there. So it's also about how you approach this and how you go about building this out. All right, I'm going to digress there.
All right, let's move on to that next one.
All right.
Oh, so it looks like we're growing a little bit here, folks. So
Padawan.
Yeah, so our hero, still kind of a youngling, has learned to see the Force through his data flow diagrams. They've completed the initiate trials. They've inventoried the documentation. Now it's time to truly become a Padawan. And that first mission is learning how to do a CMMC level 1 self-assessment. Yes, you're being required by some of your primes to do a level 2 self-assessment, or you need to have your C3PO scores. But along that way, you should be working through your SSP. Technically, you shouldn't even be ready for an assessment if you haven't done a self-assessment. It's part of your security assessment controls, is that you constantly monitor these. And so one way to establish that evidence is through your level 1 self-assessment first. Now, some of you might be thinking, wait, we're going for a level 2. Why spend time on our level 1? Well, you don't start by finding Darth Vader. You first have to learn how to hold that lightsaber. And that's really what level 1 is. It's where you learn how the assessment process actually works. It's where you learn how to interpret a requirement and turn it into a control statement. It's where you learn what
that
objective
little
evidence
ball
looks
that
like.
floats around. That little ball that floats around while you're training with your lightsaber,
Yeah, exactly.
and zaps you when you get things wrong. That's level 1. You're training, but level 1 is part of level 2. So if you get level 1 done, you're already that far along into level 2 because they are part of each other, if you will. Level 1 is part of level 2. I'm pretty sure everybody knows that, but I want to mention that. But that training ball, picture that.
It's the experience. That training ball is the experience. It's not did we configure it, it's when we prove we configured it. That training ball proves that you can feel the Force, because if you try to predict where it's going, you're going to get hit. But if you can feel where it's going, you're going to know. And that's a different mindset. The assessments are built on evidence and not assumptions, not good intentions, not verbal explanations, evidence. Every practice, you should be able to answer with 3 simple questions. Can you show the assessor the policy or procedure that requires this? Can I just demonstrate that the control is actually implemented? And finally, can I explain how this works in your environment? And until you can do those 3 questions at a level 1 self-assessment across those 17 controls to meet the 15 requirements of, you can't complete your Padawan training. Because level 2, as Kelly said, doesn't simply ask whether control exists. It asks whether you meet those requirements through your controls that are institutionalized, repeatable, documented, and consistently performed. So you're learning the basic forms of the lightsaber. It's how you build your muscle memory. It's how you build your confidence. You focus on the learning. And that's really kind of where we're going in terms of level 1. And so when we're often working with clients, is we get them up to a level 1 first before we go do a deep dive and work on a gap analysis for level 2. And that might be a strategy that works for your clients as well. So it's something we highly encourage at KNC.
Now, I'm going to jump in here and mention that why does the levels tie so much into scoping? Because if you're going enterprise scope, then your enterprise scope covers level 1 and level 2 because it's in the same fully scoped environment. However, if you're doing an enclave for your level 2, do you know what that means for the rest of your enterprise? The rest of your enterprise is your level 1 environment to meet FCI requirements. So that's why level 1 is still very important and critical, because if you're going the enclave approach, you still need to think about the level 1 side. And so this is a great exercise. Even if you haven't decided on your scope, you go through this. 1, you build the beginning of your evidence repository, because a lot of times level 1 gets just a checkbox exercise. Yes, 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 no, 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 and done. And it really shouldn't be that. It should be going for what I call a defensible level one of self-assessment, which is you're doing the assessment and you're capturing the detail and you're capturing the evidence. So you're not just saying, yes, we do, yes, we don't, yes, we do. You're saying, yes, we do it. Here's how. What's that going to lead into? Eventually your SSP implementation statement. And here's the proof. And you're building your evidence so that you can truly say, yep, we're absolutely level one self-assessment compliant, and we can prove it. Would you ever have to prove it? Maybe not. Possibly. Probably not. But if you can, it's going to be way better for you as you then pursue going up to level 2, if you will. Okay. Back to you.
Why don't we move on to the next slide?
All right.
So everything we've covered so far has really prepared our Padawan for this moment.
Could I have teed you up better?
No, you did not.
I couldn't have teed you up better for this slide. It's almost like I predicted it was coming.
Yes. So as a youngling, you learned how to see the force through your data flows. And as an initiate, you searched the archives and you completed your document inventory. Then as a Padawan, you conducted your first assessment and learned what defensible evidence looked like through your level 1 and got your whole business up to that kind of mentality of we need to be level 1. Now the real trials begin. Now we have our Jedi trials. And this isn't about memorizing NIST controls. It's about changing the way you think. One of the biggest misconceptions about CMMC is that, it's a checklist of 110 requirements. It's not even a checklist of 320 assessment objectives. The controls are an expression of 5 larger disciplines, the 5 trials of the Jedi. And these go back, 100,000 years before the Republic. And so when we're thinking about the Jedi trials, we can think about the first one as a skill. What's your assessment boundary? The second trial is more your courage. You need to be able to deal with the organizational transformation and change. A lot of companies struggle with CMMC because they don't want to change, or they think it's just an IT problem. Your third trial is the trial of the flesh, the physical. Where does your paper CUI live? What do you do with your physical removable media, your laptops, the visitors that move through your sites? The fourth trial is your spirit, the things you can't see, your security protection assets, the systems that protect your CUI. And those systems, those security protection assets are the guardians of the enclave or your enterprise scope. And finally, the fifth trial is insight. And we're going to go through each of these. But if insight defined the boundaries, or skill defined your boundaries, your insight is what proves it. Those are your audit logs, your vulnerability scans, everything that gives you the ability to trace actions back to an individual user. So you'll notice something about these 5 trials. They're connected, just like the force. A weak physical boundary will affect your segmentation. Poor governance will impact your evidence, right? If you're missing audit logs, well, that's going to make your security protections difficult to defend. Something I'm dealing with right now with some people. Everything must work together. And so you have to really understand how those people, processes, technologies, facilities, and governance come together through these 5 trials to create a defensible assessment boundary. And so let's dig deeper into each of these 5 key trials of CMMC. So, if you want to move on to the next slide, you more than can. Unless you have anything you want to add.
No, that was perfect. I think it's a good to. I'm going to leave this up just long enough so everybody can see how cool it looks and reread all of the 5 trials. Okay, now we can move into them.
And for those who don't know, if you have to go deep in the canon to get to the Jedi trials, but they did sort of slow down after Vader, but we don't need.
So you're saying there was a slowdown?
Yeah, they slow down.
Is that
they slow down. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Huh. So that first skill, that first trial that a young Jedi must face on the way to becoming a scoping master are the boundaries, segmentations, and CU enclaves. It's a skill because scoping is exactly that, a skill. People are good at scoping. They might geek out at making boundary diagrams. I do. Actually, I find it relaxing to fire up Raw.io or Lucidchart. A little less relaxing if I fire up Visio. Um, but there's something about like building the puzzle. I love making boundary diagrams. It isn't something you can memorize from a regulation. It's something you have to develop through practice. It's really the single most important skill in all of CMMC is how you can create boundaries and segmentations. If you get your scope, if you get this wrong, you're going to fail your assessment. You'll spend too much money on the wrong licenses. You'll end up protecting the wrong systems. You'll write the wrong SSPs. So what it boils down to is, where does the CUI live? Where does it travel? And if I need to, how do I create the physical and logical separation of those paths? Because once you can answer where does it live and where does it travel, now the diagram will begin to reveal itself. Now you can have your enterprise where normally, like, your finance, your marketing, your HR, your payroll, all the rigmarole of business happens, and then you can have that CUI enclave. Maybe you're a company of 10 and you realize, wait a minute, if 6 people are in scope, there's zero benefit for me to carve out an enclave. Why am I going to make an enclave for 40% of my, or for 60% of my employees when I can just bring everybody into scope? So those are the decisions that you get into. But if you do have an enclave, the purpose of segmentation is simple. You have to separate the CUI from everything that doesn't need access to it. Because every system inside the assessment boundary will increase your cost, you'll increase your complexity, the amount of evidence you need to collect, and your assessment effort. So the fewer components that you bring inside of your scope, the easier it is to write an SSP, the easier it is to assess your environment. It's really not about making the enclave as large as possible. It's about making it as large as necessary. A lot of our manufacturers do like an in-between. Like, you just can't, your whole shop is going to be in scope, the physical footprint, but then they might restrict their travel lines inside of their environment and limit specific physical areas inside of that, or just their digital areas inside of that. We almost like an interclave, we call it. Because not every user has a legal need to access CUI. Not every application needs to support the CUI mission. And that's really what the power of good segmentation comes into. It's identity controls, it's access controls, it's network controls, I think about it, your administrative procedures, and really your governance. Can you actually enforce these things? Which makes it a critical business decision, because you have to start with your contracts. Which contracts actually have CUI? You have to then think about your engineering, your leadership, and your business owners, and decide who really needs access to your CUI. I mean, sometimes you might even have to tell the president, as much as she hates hearing it. It's like, no, we're not going to bring you in scope of our CUI environment. There's just really no legal need for you to access it. And that does happen. Sometimes people with power desire more, and you have to say no. So the goal isn't to build the biggest enclave, it's to build the right enclave. And it might be an enterprise scope is the right enclave. It's how you exist to protect the mission. Some of our employers, they start with an enterprise scope because they know before they get their assessment, they can't get a handle on the data flows. And then for that first C3PO assessment, they start big, and then they learn to scope down as they restrict those data flows. And if you have the ability to work over a few years, that's a great way to do it. For a lot of customers, it's too late for that approach because they're prime demanding a level 2 assessment, so they don't have the time to think about it that way. And that might drive them into like a managed CUI enclave. Like if you use like Quick Track, you're only responsible for 56 of the objectives. And so you're handing off a lot of your authority to a different Jedi Knight to basically, you might still be a Padawan, but you're going to rely heavily on your master to get you across that line. And so those are all decisions that have to happen. Any questions on that one? If not, we can go ahead and move on there, Kelly.
I want to add just 2 thoughts on this. One is, when you think about the scoping that we're talking about here, don't think of it from the network diagram perspective of an internally focused think of it as its own complete thing. And what I mean is, think about where your CUI goes internally, but also externally. Those external connections have to be documented. So where does it go? What cloud did it go to? What cloud-based applications? Where does it go? Your subcontractors, all those things. Where does the CUI that you receive go? And so, one, think of it from that perspective. And then two, when it comes to shrinking down to an enclave, there are three parts of an enclave. So an enclave isn't just the systems. You have to think about it from the perspective of your enclave is built up by the systems, by the people. So you enclave your people. Maybe it's only 5 people. Maybe it's 25. Maybe it's 100. You enclave down, shrink your scope of people, but also facilities. So you might only have one location, doesn't matter, but you might have 20 locations. You can de-scope your locations as well in your enclave process, hypothetically. So always think of the enclave approach as shrinking all three of those categories. What can you do to shrink it down? Where can you get stuff out of scope? The more you can get out of scope, the better for your assessment process. Just make sure you do it right and don't think something's out of scope and suddenly find out, oopsie, it actually is, because that can blow up assessments. And I've seen that, as I call them, landmines that blow up assessments. That's one that I have seen blow up assessments several times. Okay, I digress. Moving on to our next trial.
So the next trial, Purge, it has a lot less to do with technology. This trial is more about your leadership. This is where you realize CMMC is not an IT problem. The hardest part of CMMC isn't implementing the security controls in a way that meets the requirements. It's when you're changing the way an organization does business. For a majority of our customers, their biggest concern when they're scoping isn't the price of the tool set. It isn't whether they're enterprise or scoping. Their primary objective is, how do I do CMMC in a way that doesn't change the way I do business now? And if you don't want to change certain procedures, you might either find yourself unable to come up with controls for some requirements or spending a lot more money than you need to. I've watched people spend over $100,000 on technology while avoiding the true things that they need to do. This happens with physical security all the time. Nobody wants to tell the machinist when it's 105 outside that they need to shut the bay doors, because that's where the boundary is settled. Nobody wants to do that. But if that's where you set your boundary, you can't have the bay doors open constantly without a gate around your parking lot. So there are changes to the business processes that are needed. CMC is not just an IT process. I know I'm talking to the crowd here, but it's not an IT project. It's not an IT project. It's an organizational transformation. Engineering will influence your scope. Contracts influence your scope. Human resources influence your scope. Facilities, guess what, influence your scope. How you do purchasing influences your scope. And most importantly, your executive leadership will influence your scope. So you need to ask when you're starting this trial, are we willing to change the way our company operates? Because CMC might involve some difficult decisions. And that's where governance comes on board, because part of your change is having a change control board. Now, CMMC doesn't specifically require you to have a change control board, but it is really hard to pass without a documented change control board. You really just need a change control process. But trust me, it's a lot easier to document and make sure it happens if you formalize and set up a change control board and you have a good ticketing system. Those two things I think are critical requirements that nobody says you must have, but you almost always will fail without them, is a good change control board and a good ticketing system. So be honest about your current state. Every organization has their weaknesses. That's what your risk register is for. Be courageous. Document your risks when you're doing your gap analysis. So many people just fill out the gap analysis and the POAM. If you discover something that needs to be mitigated, that creates a risk. So either combine your risk register and your POAM with a couple columns, or make sure that you're always updating a risk register as you discover new weaknesses. Because remember, a hidden weakness can become an assessment finding. It's a place for the Sith to hide. And your responsibility isn't to defend against the status quo as a Padawan going through this trial. You have to be able to tell leadership that the easiest solution may not be the right solution, that the cheapest solution might be the most expensive over time. And that does take courage, and it does reduce risk. So Kelly, are there any comments you have in terms of what strategies people can take with their management with introducing what needs to happen with CUI and CMMC?
Yeah, lots of thoughts, but what I'll try to get myself focused on is how critical it is for this to be a top-down process, and it rarely is. Normally, and I'm sure there are people on here that have experienced this, it is a, hey, IT guy, here's the CMMC thing, go figure it out. The amount of times I've heard that comment from clients we brought on board, and it's a single IT person or maybe a very small IT department or no IT department fully outsourced, it happens like that often. It can't be done. You cannot pass an assessment without leadership buy-in, leadership effort and support, and leadership being involved. Because on the assessment, you might be able to just put your team in it and pass the assessment, but you might need to be in there. It depends on the size of the organization, what everybody does. You might need to be involved. And if you've just handed everything off and you're not going to think about it until a month before your assessment and then get involved, it's going to be very hard. Leadership has to be involved in this process to get you over the finish line. It needs to be there from the support of implementing the things that have to be done, enforcing the organizational change that needs to happen. They need to be the drivers of it. They need to be the ones that are making decisions and are making the decisions on what gets allocated, time, money, resources. All of that flows up and is done by that leadership level. All of those things have to happen. It can't happen just at a lower tiered level of your IT manager, forcing them to do everything and try to get everything to happen within the company, or even an IT champion, or even a non-IT champion that's in a company that doesn't have their own IT. It puts a ton of pressure on them. They need to be able to have this support. And we've seen this with clients that you've got to have that buy-in and have that leadership support. Okay, that's like the Jedi Council. Are they the Jedi Masters?
Yeah, your change control board could be the Jedi Council. That's a good one. Let's play with that. Let's see what happens in our trial of the flesh. CMC involves the flesh because unlike software, your cloud services, or your purge, people and physical objects exist inside of your boundary. They exist in the real world. Cybersecurity professionals are nerds. They sometimes forget to patch the people, and they become focused on the firewalls, the cloud services, the endpoint response, the latest doohickamabob gadget that they can install. But every cyber attack eventually becomes physical. And they could start physical. Someone could walk through the door. Someone could plug in a USB. We just saw that with the law firms. People like to joke about the USB controls being overblown. And guess what? We now know that adversary nations or in other businesses were hiring people to bring USB sticks into law firms and to plug them in. So those risks exist. Somebody could pick up a laptop by accident. Somebody might print a drawing. Someone might throw a hard drive in the trash before it was sanitized. The physical world is where many of our greatest vulnerabilities exist. And so, can you show me where your CUI sleeps at night? Where is it at rest? Sometimes it's a secure server. Sometimes it's a hardened laptop. Maybe it's a filing cabinet. Sometimes nobody knows. And if nobody knows, you've already identified a significant risk. Physical security isn't just about locks. It's about controlling access to everything that supports your CUI environment. Who can enter the facility? Who has the keys? Are these keys physical keys? Digital keys? Fobs? Do you escort your visitors? Does your landlord send in construction workers after hours and doesn't want to comply with the visitor policy? What are you going to do? Where do you keep laptops? What about your backup media? Do you follow a 3-2-1? I see a lot of companies they're almost to keep their compliance better, they're making their backup strategy worse by just saying we only back up OneDrive and SharePoint, and the rest of it you're on your own. We don't save anything. That's for a fully remote company. That's a good strategy. We don't back up your endpoints. We only back up OneDrive and SharePoint and GCC High. For a manufacturer, that's sure if the solution might be compliant, but what's it do to your business risk if your server with your ERP system goes down? So don't think about just shrinking your backups to meet CMMC. Good backups, they're like the victory gardens of the 21st century. It's the only way to really predict and stop ransomware is to have really good backups. So don't stop at doing the bare minimum backups for CMMC. You might only put the bare minimum in your SSP so you don't fail if you're not backing up your ERP server correctly. But make sure as a company you have an overarching backup strategy if you're limiting your backup strategy just for your scope. Because you don't want someone to just walk away with your information. It's not just CUI they steal. They steal your stuff. They steal your effort. Media isn't just USB drives. It's your laptops. It's your cell phones. It's external hard drives, paper documents, Blu-ray discs, CDs, backup tapes, printed engineering drawings. Basically anything that can store controlled, unclassified information. Your AI agents. One miscellaneous laptop, one thumb drive. That's all it really takes. So where are you going to store CUI in a controlled place? How are you going to, you cannot lose what you never create. So how are you going to handle prints? The printed documents for our construction manufacturers, this is huge. That caveat that you could have a paper-only scope and you don't need a third-party assessment. You just have to affirm that you meet the rest of the controls to handle 171. For our construction customers, this has been a godsend because as a general contractor, when they're drawing up the plans, they're moving digital CUI all over the place between designers and engineers, but it's staying in shop. And it's mainly just them and maybe one or two subcontractors who are licensed to draw plans. But when they get out to the job site and they're GCing, they could have 50 to 100 subcontractors on any job. And the painter needs the blueprints to know which wall the blue paint was on. But Billy the painter does not have a robust IT system. So if I can bring a printout through the job site and give it to Billy the painter, and then take it back when I'm done, that protects my supply chain. So those subcontractor flow downs with physical CUI are huge. Some of our companies that have critical finishers, or anybody works in like fourth or fifth tier of the supply chain, you know the pain of finishers. There's not many of them. Your prime dictates which ones you have to use, and sometimes the finisher your prime is telling you must use is also a finisher that's being like, I don't care, I'm not going to do that CMC thing. So you end up finding yourself, well, what am I going to do? Well, now a lot of my customers are sending the print if they need it to do the job. They box up the part with the print, and it goes to the finisher. Whatever magic they do happens, and they ship the finished part back with the print in the box. And that is one way that they've been able to not have to need a level 2 third-party assessment, and then can just affirm that they meet the ability to hold 171. It's kind of like the Jedi Temple. Not everyone had unrestricted access. Certain archives were restricted. Some archives were even lost. If you might have been on a secret water planet that was making thousands and thousands of clones. You want to talk about unauthorized access and what happens? Well, there's a perfect example. When you can make an entire planetary system disappear from the Jedi archives, you have an access problem. You have a storage problem. The movement wasn't authorized. The destruction was deliberate. And so you have to think about how you're going to secure your network and how you're going to fit that into your entire CUI lifecycle.
Greg, that was awesome. I'm just entertaining myself and having so many different ideas going. But the only thing I'm going to comment on this is a perspective of an assessor that's done on-site physical assessments. And so I'm going to just riff on that a little bit. I've done several. Completely coincidentally, all of the on-site assessments I've done have been in Hawaii. It's completely random. Of course, it's coincident. But on all the physical I've done, the companies that I've seen do it really well, all are doing very similar things. Sometimes they have a facility clearance already and they're already doing the right things and they already know what they're doing. But a lot of times companies don't. And so you need to look at every single one of these, because when we come on site, we have 18 assessment objectives. We got our checklist, so to speak, and we are going through and verifying what you said you did. Just during the assessment, you're saying what we do and you're proving it. We're there helping you prove it on site. Okay, this is our camera system. Okay, there's the camera. Oh, camera's pointing here and there. Oh, here's our video system. Here's the display. Here's how we access it. Here's our storage locker for, oh, it's got the CUI label on it. Here's our stored cabinet drawer where we put all our USB files. Hey, USB drives. Hey, look, our USB drives are properly marked with CUI. Literally, that is how it's gone every time I've done an on-site physical inspection. So it's a key part of your assessment to be able to pass these things. And we keep talking about scoping, and I mentioned it earlier, but there's another key word is descoping. So what you can descope is also just as important as what you scope. So if you can descope physical CUI, if you can descope USB drives, if you can descope external hard drives, that helps you and makes it easier for you to pass an assessment, especially on the physical inspection. So in other words, if you have an office that has no CUI and can't have CUI, you've now made that office out of scope. It's hard to do, but it does happen sometimes on assessments that an office is descoped because there's no chance for CUI there. A lot of times it happens too. Companies will have like an executive suite where an executive goes to every once in a while. So this physical inspection stuff is actually a lot more important than maybe a lot of companies think about. So I just wanted to share that perspective from being one that's been out there in the fields, if you will. Next trial is spirit.
So some things you can't see, and that's spirit. But you know it's there because your spirit's what protects you. It's what flows around you. Those are your security protection assets or SPAs. And when you reach this part of your CMMC trials on your journey to becoming a scoping Jedi Master, this is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the entire CMMC scoping guide. People understand where is your CUI, but what protects your CUI, that's where they usually get quiet. The Jedi Temple, a good example of SPA. The Force wasn't stored in the Jedi Temple. The Temple doesn't create the Force, but it was designed to protect and strengthen those who use it. Security protection assets kind of work in the same way. Or the power shields on Hoth before the Empire was able to destroy the Rebel base on the frozen moon. Those power shields were a security protection asset. And even the bad guys, yes, on the moon of Endor, they too have SPAs. Now, you want to talk about, a bad poem. How do you get the Death Star blown up once because of bad least privileges, and then you go and do the same thing again? Had the Empire had a really good poem, maybe that second Death Star wouldn't have blown up. And we have to think about those security protection assets, whether it's the frozen moon, planet of Hoth or the moon of Endor. Yeah, Hoth was a planet, not a moon, I think. I don't need to get into that nerdy detail. Your identity provider, your firewalls, your EDR, endpoint detection and responses, your vulnerability scans, your SIM. Technically, you can do all of those manually. Technically, you can also fail by doing all of those manually. Or you're trying to save money by doing your vulnerability scans manual, or you're trying to just rely on Defender to do all of your logs, and you're going to manually review them every month. If you actually calculate your billable hours to a client or to working on a product or doing something else for your IT job, it's cheaper for you to hire someone or to use a tool than it is to go with a manual approach. When it comes to security protection assets, free is often the most expensive thing you can do. And that's where scoping becomes interesting. It's only about the applicable controls that they need to hit. So your security protection assets don't need to have all 110 control requirements met through your controls. You have to explain which controls are applicable and how you meet those and how which requirements are applicable and how your controls meet those requirements. And it's also where you get a ton of evidence. So you need time and you need to do it right. Do not wait and rush on your security protection assets until the end. It might impact your licensing. If you have all of your workers on business standard and you want business premium, if you're like, okay, well, I'll add the P1 and the P2 add-ons, well, it would have been cheaper just to rebuy the business premium licenses. Some people pay for Sentinel, but don't like it and might go with something different like Sentinel One or Huntress or Nectar because they just, so they may not like the tool that they have. Some might be on-prem. If you do any kind of load balancer, is that, what's the difference between a SPA and a CUI asset? Well, is it storing, processing, and transmitting CUI? And if you have a load balancer in your server and the CUI is moving unencrypted between your colos, well, then that load balancer is not a SPA, but a CUI asset. So it's really about thinking about, does the CUI store, process, and transmit on this device that's protecting my network? And it can happen, especially with next-gen firewalls that can do packet level inspections from level 1 to level 7. And if they are, they can be storing, processing, and transmitting CUI. So you have to think about what's happening with its SPA and making sure that it never stores, processes, and transmits CUI if you want it to be categorized as a security protection asset. And I think that's one of the bigger challenges with some modern day SIMs and some modern day firewalls, is knowing when those tools actually are in scope of CUI.
Hey, Greg, I want to share just a couple of analogies here. I was thinking this as you're talking, and this ties into both SPAs and boundaries and scoping, is if you think of the lightsaber, I would say the lightsaber is like your firewall. It is the first line of defense that you have to protect your internal boundary. What is the internal boundary? You as the Jedi, the hand, so to speak, is the start of the internal boundary. Your firewall is your lightsaber. Your blaster is more like your antivirus and your malware. And you're using those tools to defend your internal boundary. All your SPAs, are really the technology that helps us. And what are those? Those are the droids, of course. My favorites. I am a droid builder and a droid smith. I love the droids. The droids are your SPAs. They're the ones that are running around trying to help you, trying to protect you, trying to keep you safe. So just another way to think about these things and think about the scoping and how things work, and just get this all into your head to understand it. Because if you've made it this far with us, you probably either A, already know this stuff, or B, are still trying to get this all mastered and understood, because it's a lot. If you think passing an assessment is easy, you're probably going to be wrong. It's not. It's a lot to do, even when you have the knowledge and the expertise. Even us internally passing our own DIPCAC reassessment was a massive effort. It was difficult because even though we know what we're doing, there's still a lot you have to do to be able to prove you're doing the right things. Okay, I just wanted to add those perspectives because I could not help adding in the droids.
No, the lightsaber is a firewall, literally. It's a literal wall of fire.
Exactly.
Energy flowing through a crystal. But
I'm going to just mention for everybody, we're going to keep going until we finish for the sake of the recording. If anybody feels like they need to jump off, because I know we're already past an hour and 15 minutes. If you want to jump off, go for it. No worries. But we're going to keep going for the sake of a recording to get this to the very end. And we'll be putting out slide deck. We'll put it out the link to the recording once we get that all done. So just in case you've got something you need to jump to or whatever, please feel free. But for those who are staying on or will stay on, we really appreciate your time. Okay. Back in. All right. So now
this is our final trial before we reach our Jedi Knight status. Countdown. And this is your insight. And these are your audit logs, your accountability. A scoping Jedi Master must be able to see what others cannot. The Force gives you awareness. It's how you sense movement. It's how you detect danger. It's how you understand what is happening before anyone else. And in a way, that's what audit logs do, right? Audit logs serve exactly the purpose in cybersecurity. They are your organization's awareness. Without audit logs, you are operating blind. And there are blind Jedis, and they can do the work, but they have compensating controls. Imagine I asked you these three questions. Who accessed these engineering drawings yesterday? Who logged into the CY enclave at 13 in the morning? Who deleted that project folder? Who connected a new device? Who attempted to access the enclave but was denied? If I ask you those questions and your answer is I don't know, you will fail your assessment. Hands down, no questions asked.
Here's one that comes up a lot. That could be a question just like that. When was the last time that you reviewed the events that have occurred and updated the events that you are tracking in your audit logs? That is part of it. And that's one that often gets missed, is being able to prove that you have looked at the events that have happened and said, oh, we weren't tracking for this one occurred. We now need to add that one in to our tracking.
No, the verbs then, Kelly, are really important, whether I'm monitoring, logging, or auditing my logs.
Yep.
Interesting.
Controlling.
It seems like what you're saying is a lot of people don't actually do the audit part. They just collect the logs, and they're not going back once a month and saying, oh, maybe this one's a critical, maybe, and reclassifying their rules.
Yep. Because there's a lot to the audit family. It's not just a matter of creating logs as evidence. Logs are great evidence, but there's so much process around the audit family and what you do and what you update and how you correlate and how you track. That audit family, I've seen that trip up a lot of assessments. I've seen that because it was completely outsourced to an MSP that didn't show up for the assessment because they didn't realize they were have to. Long story. That audit family is, I think, probably one of the more misunderstood or maybe the more difficult ones because of that, because there's a lot that you have to do to it that's very easy to misunderstand, misinterpret, or just not do and go, oh, well, we were creating the logs. We've got the logs. We back them up. We do this. We do that. Oh, but we weren't updating. Oh, we weren't tracking. We weren't, whatever. It's a very easy family to make mistakes in.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up the point of the MSPs, Kelly, because this is the one where they're often brought in scope and may not realize it. A lot of audit log tools are sold through channel sales, and the MSP might act as the stock, or the MSP is the connection between the third-party audit tool and the OSC, and the OSC's only job is to declare an event if they have an incident. So the audit logs, the audit and accountability gets very well connected to your incident response. And a lot of times, an MSP may not be aware that when they're selling you a product, they're also promising it to be delivering some services as well. So you have to really make sure that your MSP is there to be your partner. For a lot of them, they are the master and you are the Padawan. But many MSPs, not on purpose, but they might walk you down the path to the dark side because they just don't understand the insight necessary for the audit logs. So make
falling
sure
to the dark side. This is perfect. Falling to the dark side is failing your assessment.
Yes.
And that MSP tie-in, holy cow, almost every single assessment that I've been on or I've heard back from my assessors from, there has been some kind of a conflict or an issue that happened because of a managed service provider. You are not just outsourcing your IT to them, you are outsourcing your ability to pass the assessment to them. And if they're not doing the things that they're supposed to do, you will fail your assessment. And that's a big problem that I've seen happen in multiple different ways. So your MSP is a very, very key partner. Whatever you're outsourcing, you're giving all that risk to them, but you still own it because you have to pass your assessment. They don't have to pass your assessment. You have to pass your assessment. So you're giving a lot to them. So one, make sure you have a good service level agreement with them because we do look at that as an artifact on assessments. Make sure they've agreed to and accepted to do what it says they're supposed to do, what you're asking them to do. It's probably good to have that in a contract that says, yes, we will do that. That's something I've seen missed many times. So the MSP aspect, I could probably talk MSPs alone for hours, and I'm sure Greg could too. it's a very important part that if you are bringing a partner in and you're outsourcing to them, that they're doing what they're supposed to do, or they could make you fail. And I've seen it happen. And it is sad when you see a company fail because of their partner, not because of what they were doing.
I'm going to do a show on the Trade Republic next. So keep that in put that into the boot. So I think that's it for those are the 5 trials. And when you think about scoping along those 5 lines, going from that boundary segmentation, going from each of from those elements to your courage to being able to do it to being able to do it on your own, to understanding that you can't do it on your own, all the way to the insights provided through your accountability. Those are really our 5 steps that you take to scope out your environment. And if you need any help with scoping, or your clients need any help with scoping, that is one thing that KNC does provide. And so I will move it back into the infomercial pitch with Kelly moving into the next slide.
All right, so that was a perfect tee up. Is you guys might not know this, but here at KNC, I didn't even click and it went ahead. So we've been growing like crazy, both sides, the consulting side and the assessment side. Assessment side, obviously, because there's more and more and more companies. We still have flexibility. We still have capacity. I can get somebody in faster than they can be ready. That's my saying lately, and no one's proved me wrong. So we can get someone in really, really quick. But oh my God, Andres, that's a good one. I like that name. Okay, I'm gonna try not to track myself on that. That was a good one though. It's a Phantom Menace. It's the MSP Menace. Perfect. So we are growing. We are doing a lot of really good things. We are taking care of our clients. We are getting companies ready for the assessments, and we're assessing companies, and we're having a blast. We're growing as a company, bringing people on and getting stuff going. So if you are looking for a partner, I'm sorry, but you can't get a better partner than KNC. And obviously I'm biased. I accept my bias. I admit my bias. But my bias is based on the fact that we are a full service provider. We do all of this, and all of this works to help our clients. Everything we learned from doing assessments and on the assessment side flows down, so to speak, to our consulting clients and the lessons and the things that we implement for them because of what we see on assessments, and vice versa. So we are an awesome provider. We're one of the only providers in the West Coast even paying attention to CMMC. So we're doing good. And I'm just thrilled. I have such an awesome team. Chuck and I are so thrilled because this company we're almost 9 years old. It's taken us a long time to get here, but we've got a great team of consultants, great team of assessors, just a awesome team. So, and I'm very, very thankful for them. And I know Chuck is as well. So, and obviously nobody's more fun than us. Nobody's going to be riffing on Star Wars or making stupid jokes all the way through a podcast more than us. We're here to have fun because that's what our brains do. Especially when you get me and Greg together, we have a lot of fun. All right.
Yeah, and stay tuned for the KNC CMMC joke book.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, sooner or later, it's officially going to come out, and it's not a joke, so to speak. I can't say we. Chuck has been collecting things that come out of my brain that I say random times with no filter that sometimes are actually funny, apparently. And he's been collecting those over the years. So eventually we will actually put out a CMMC joke book, and it will be entertaining for sure. So stay tuned for that. That's a good mention, Chuck. All right. So contact information's up there. If you want to, down at the bottom, that's my son, Britton. He runs our sales and marketing. So if you'd like a direct sales contact that can get things on the schedule, that could get you documentation, get you set up to get a proposal, whatever it is, feel free to reach out to Britton. He'll get you set up with us and get you on our calendar and all that fun stuff. We're here to help, and we look forward to seeing you guys on our next episode, which will be episode 5. I like that title, but we'll have to let you know. That might have to get brought into one. But episode 5 will be coming up first Thursday of every month, 1:00 p.m. Pacific time. So thank you, everybody, for staying on. Normally, what we're going to do at the end of these is a thing that we're calling Jedi or Jawa. And so this is kind of the question and answer time. And because we've gone so long, if anybody has questions and want to stay on, we will definitely take them. If anybody needs to jump, go for it. But we will jump into our final section, which is Ask the Assessor, or for us, Jedi or Jawa. Feel free to come off mute if you have a question to ask. Type it in the chat if you have a question to ask. Open forum. If not,
Any comments or questions for us? Doesn't have to be related to scoping. It can be anything CMMC related.
absolutely.
We'll do our best. If
Absolutely.
not, we'll see you guys next month.
And I just realized I've got 3 minutes to jump onto a call with a company about their assessment. So it's perfect timing. So I think we'll say, since nobody jumped in or put something in the chat, let's go ahead and wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this first episode of our new podcast. And thank you, Greg, for all the work you did getting prepared for this. Really excited about what we're going to be able to do with this and getting this out there, getting the recordings out there, and having a whole lot of fun trying to help everybody with this craziness that is CMMC. All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right, everybody. Bye.